Reports of depression, confusion, and anxiety are rampant in the nation's largest facility for unaccompanied migrant children. A group of attorneys interviewed some children who've been detained for long stretches inside the facility in Homestead, Florida. A new CBS News report describes life at the Homestead shelter and explores the children's testimonies to better understand life inside the shelter. CBS News investigative reporter Graham Cates joins me now. Welcome, Graham. So great to have you here. So you actually visited this shelter, this in Homestead, Florida. Tell us what you saw there and how you got these testimonials from these children that are in your article.
It's hard to understate just how large the Homestead facility is. It's at this point it has double the number of kids of even the closest shelter to it and has the capacity for a triple that amount. And we're talking about acres upon acres of facility, separated even by an entire road that's fenced off with this massive green fence that you can't see in or out of. And on one side is more than 1,000 children ages 13 to 16, and then on another side is hundreds of children who are age 17. And they don't get to interact with each other. Even if they're siblings, they only get a little bit of interaction. It has to be like by appointment. And the children go in single file rows. They have a very strict schedule starting early in the morning through the evening. And they're kind of just kept in a very orderly process. They're not allowed to touch each other or really get a lot of interpersonal interaction at all.
And some of these testimonies are just heartbreaking. The stories, like you said, of not being able to talk to your sibling maybe more than once a week, or not speak to your parents on the phone very often, and you hear about children crying at night. Where did these testimonies come from? They came from the lawyers of the children?
So the entire nation's law for unaccompanied children, how we have to shelter them in government custody, is based on an agreement called the Flores Settlement. And this is a landmark Supreme Court case that set really generations worth of rules for just how we take care of unaccompanied migrant children in our custody. And there's this team of lawyers, hundreds of them, who go and check out the various shelters around the country and just make sure that they're complying with the law. And one of the ways they do that is by interviewing children. And we never really get to hear from the children in Homestead. So in this case, they filed, it was 76 testimonials from children describing their lives inside Homestead.
One thing that I think is very interesting and I think sort of important to point out is you said this is the largest shelter for unaccompanied migrant children, but that doesn't mean they didn't show up at the border with a family member. It just means they didn't show up with a mother or father. They could have been with an uncle or an aunt, and in that case they were separated, correct?
Right. Family separation, as we know it, refers specifically to parents. So if a kid is with another relative, an aunt, a sibling, depending on the sibling's age, they are then classified as an unaccompanied child, and the adult is put in one direction and the kid is put in another direction in a different system.
Now, one thing that was interesting in a lot of these testimonies, they say how long the child has been here at Homestead. One child, I believe, has been there as long as 5 months. Isn't that in violation of the Flores Agreement?
Definitely. So the agreement calls for children to be processed and placed with a sponsor. That could be some relative. It could be even the same relative that they came with, as expeditiously as possible. And the average right now is about 60 days, depending on the facility. And that's about where it is. It goes back and forth at Homestead. But in the past, it's been a little bit lower than that, in the 40s, and at one point even around 30 days.
And what impact does this have on the children to be at a place like this for so long, to be separated from any family members?
One of the kind of basic principles of child welfare is that children are expected to be at a small facility where they get very close personal care. And I mean, it goes without saying that at a place like Homestead, where there's right now 2,300 kids and even more staff than that, that personal care isn't really part of the equation. It's more about like I said, kind of a strict schedule to maintain order, as opposed to provide the one-on-one experience that you'd expect for childcare.
And what's also sort of amazing for a facility this large is to learn that it isn't licensed. Correct? I mean, so there has been a growing movement to move a lot of these children to licensed facilities. Why is Homestead not licensed?
It's the only facility in the entire country that isn't licensed by a state inspection agency, and that's because it's on federal land, and also because it's described as an influx facility. It's able to forego some of the rules laid out in Flores, according to the government. The lawyers say that shouldn't be the case because it is designed to be temporary, just while we're dealing with this crisis. But here's the thing. Is it temporary? At this point, it's been here for more than a year.
And there are children who've been there for longer than 5 months, according to these, these testimonies. So if it's not licensed, then does that mean it is not subject to inspections?
That's correct. There's more than 160 other shelters, and they're all inspected, and these are surprise inspections by state investigators, and they just go, they have these lists of like thousands of little things you'd look for. Are there little holes in fences? Are the records being kept well? And this one isn't subject to any of that, and they'll tell you enough Congress people and media and other people who are looking at come and look at the facility. But it's not really the same thing. I'm not an expert on child welfare, and a congressperson isn't an expert on child welfare. State career inspectors are. Right,
the ones who need to go in there and check it out themselves. All right, Graham Cates, thank you so much. Excellent reporting on this. Thank you for sharing it with us.
Thank you.